The weight of thunder. The radio crackles with static as Audie Murphy adjusts the heavy field unit against his shoulder, shells whistling overhead and exploding in the muddy field beyond their position. January in the Vosges Mountains feels like the world has forgotten warmth exists. Frozen mud crunches under his boots as he shifts position in the bombed-out French farmhouse. At 19, he looks even younger, with frost crystals forming on his gaunt cheeks. But his hands remain steady on the radio dials, while seasoned veterans around him flinch at each incoming round. The German artillery has found their range, and this makeshift command post is taking a beating. Through the shattered window, Murphy can see the hulk of a burned-out tank destroyer at the road junction below, its main gun pointing uselessly toward the snow-heavy pines where German voices echo between the trees. The machine had taken a direct hit 2 days ago, but something about it draws his eye. The way it sits there like a steel monument to all the plans that don't survive contact with the enemy. Sergeant Hayes, a grizzled Oklahoma farm boy turned squad leader, crouches beside Murphy and feeds him coordinates scribbled on a soggy field message. The 3rd Infantry Division's positions in these frozen Vosges forests feel more like a prayer than a battle line. Every man knows the Germans have been massing armor and infantry for a push that could crack their entire sector wide open. "Kid's got steadier hands than most of us," Hayes mutters to Private Kowalski, who's cleaning his rifle for the 3rd time this morning. The nervousness in the farmhouse is thick enough to cut with a bayonet. Murphy keys the handset and begins transmitting coordinates, his young voice cutting through the radio chatter with surprising authority. Each number he calls out brings friendly artillery closer to their own lines. A miscalculation could mean obliteration for his own men. But the mathematics of destruction has become second nature to him. Equations solved while plaster rains from the ceiling and wooden beams groan overhead. The first friendly rounds impact in the distance, walking methodically through the German assembly areas. Murphy immediately adjusts fire, his calculations precise as a watchmaker's. He can hear enemy voices shouting orders in the pine stands, see movement between the dark trunks. A rifle bullet cracks through the window frame inches from his head, but he continues his methodical radio work, shifting seamlessly between artillery spotter and rifleman when muzzle flashes wink from the tree line. What the after-action reports won't capture is the weight. Not just the 40-pound radio, but the crushing responsibility of knowing that 3 isolated American positions depend entirely on his ability to bring salvation from the sky. In the Vosges Mountains' bitter January cold, with German forces closing like a steel trap, Murphy carries calculations that could save lives or end them with equal precision. The morning light filtering through snow clouds reveals the true scope of their predicament. German infantry has infiltrated closer than anyone realized, and the tank destroyer at the road junction below suddenly seems less like wreckage and more like the key piece of terrain that could determine whether they hold this sector or watch the entire line collapse. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation, and stay with us for the next chapters. The German attack begins with the methodical precision Murphy has learned to fear most. No wild charges or desperate assaults, just the steady professional advance of veteran infantry who know how to use the Vosges terrain. Pine branches shed their snow loads as mortar rounds bracket the farmhouse, each explosion walking closer to their position with mathematical certainty. Lieutenant Carson, barely older than Murphy, despite his officer's bars, hunches over a map that's already obsolete. The morning's intelligence reports showed German forces at least a mile out, but the rifle fire snapping through their windows tells a different story. In the frozen forests of eastern France, sound travels strangely, and the enemy has a talent for appearing where they shouldn't be. "Radio traffic's getting jammed," Carson says, his voice tight with the strain of command. "Division needs to know if we can hold this crossroads. If we lose it, the whole sector opens up." Murphy glances again at the destroyed tank destroyer below. Something about its position nags at him, the way it commands the road junction, its main gun still pointing toward the most likely avenue of German approach. Even burning and abandoned, it occupies ground that infantry would kill for. Haze materializes beside them, snow melting off his helmet liner. Germans are filtering through the trees about 300 yards out. Kowalski spotted at least 2 machine gun teams setting up in that pine grove. The radio in Murphy's hands suddenly feels heavier. Fire missions become more complex when the enemy is close enough to count individual soldiers, when friendly artillery has to thread the needle between devastating the attack and obliterating your own position. The mathematics of survival narrow to yards and minutes. Through the static, Murphy hears the distant voice of fire direction control, requesting updated target coordinates. But the situation is evolving faster than radio procedures can accommodate. German infantry appears and disappears among the snow-laden pines like ghosts, while the sound of tracked vehicles grows louder from the valley below. "They're bringing armor up," Kowalski reports from his window position, breath steaming in the frigid air. Looks like at least 2 panzers moving toward the road junction. Carson studies the tactical situation with the grim expression of an officer who realizes his orders no longer match reality. The 3rd Infantry Division's defensive plan assumed they'd have more warning, more time to coordinate fire support. The Vosges Mountains in January don't cooperate with staff college theories about mobile defense. Murphy keys the handset again, calling for immediate fire on suspected assembly areas. His voice remains steady, professional, but Hayes notices the kid's left hand tapping out nervous calculations on his knee. Range, deflection, the eternal geometry of bringing death from the sky. Each fire mission buys time, but time for what? Their position grows more precarious with each passing hour. The destroyed tank destroyer below seems to mock their situation, a reminder that armor and steel mean nothing without the human courage to use them effectively. In the gathering chaos of the German advance, that hulking piece of wreckage represents something Murphy can't yet articulate, a solution hiding in plain sight among the smoke and confusion. By noon, the tactical situation has deteriorated beyond anyone's worst-case planning. German infiltration teams have cut the telephone lines connecting their farmhouse to battalion, leaving only the radio link that grows more tenuous with each passing hour. The Vosges Mountains' deep forests seem designed to swallow communications, turning coordination into guesswork and hope. Murphy's artillery direction has broken up 2 German probing attacks, but ammunition is becoming a concern. Division fire support can't maintain this rate of expenditure indefinitely, and the enemy seems content to probe, test, and wait for the Americans to exhaust themselves. It's a patient kind of warfare that eats at soldiers' nerves like acid. Hayes returns from a reconnaissance patrol with news that confirms everyone's fears. German armors massing in the valley, at least a company of tanks and assault guns, plus supporting infantry. They're not just probing anymore. Lieutenant Carson spreads his map on an ammunition crate, weighing down the corners with rifle cartridges. The defensive positions marked in neat blue lines look increasingly fictional compared to the reality outside their windows. In eastern France's January snow, theory collides with terrain in ways that leave officers questioning everything they learned about small unit tactics. "We've got maybe 2 hours before they hit us with everything," Carson says. "Division wants us to hold as long as possible, then withdraw to secondary positions." The radio crackles with reports from other units in the 3rd Infantry Division sector. German pressure is building everywhere, a coordinated offensive designed to crack the American line and exploit the breakthrough with armor. Murphy listens to the tactical updates while studying the destroyed tank destroyer below, its silhouette stark against the snow-covered road. Kowalski checks his ammunition for the 4th time this hour, a nervous habit that's become ritual. "How long you figure we can keep this up, Sarge?" he asks Hayes. "Feels like we're playing with a stacked deck." The question hangs in the frozen air. Everyone knows the mathematics of their situation. German forces multiply, while American reinforcements remain trapped by weather and distance. The Vosges Mountains that provide defensive terrain also isolate defenders, turning each position into an island of resistance that can be bypassed or overwhelmed. Murphy key the handset again, coordinating fire support for a unit 2 miles south that's taking heavy pressure. His voice carries across the radio nets with an authority that belies his 19 years, but Hayes notices the strain in the kid's eyes. Calling artillery strikes for hours under pressure ages a man in ways that calendars can't measure. The destroyed tank destroyer below continues to dominate the road junction, even in death. Something about its position sparks an idea in Murphy's mind. Crazy, desperate, but perhaps workable. In the bitter January cold of the Vosges Mountains, desperate ideas often prove more valuable than textbook solutions. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. The German assault begins at 1400 hours with a rolling artillery barrage that turns the Vosges mountainside into a moonscape of snow, splinters, and screaming metal. Murphy crouches in the farmhouse basement as the bombardment methodically dismantles everything above ground, each explosion calculated to neutralize specific defensive positions. When the barrage lifts, German infantry emerges from the pine forests like wolves, advancing in coordinated rushes that speak of veteran training and bitter experience. Behind them, the grumble of tank engines grows louder as armor moves up the mountain road toward the junction, dominated by the burned tank destroyer. "They're coming straight at us," Hayes shouts over the rifle fire. "At least 2 platoons, maybe more." Lieutenant Carson's face has gone pale with the realization that their position cannot hold. The mathematics are simple and brutal. Too many Germans advancing against too few Americans with insufficient ammunition and no hope of reinforcement. The textbook solution is withdrawal to secondary positions, but Carson knows retreat will collapse the entire sector. Murphy grabs the radio and prepares to follow standard procedure: coordinate covering fires, organize withdrawal, preserve the unit for future operations. But his eyes keep returning to the destroyed tank destroyer below. Its main gun still points toward the German approach route, and its position commands every avenue of advance. "Lieutenant," Murphy says quietly, "that tank destroyer's gun might still be operational." Carson stares at him. "It's been burning for 2 days. The crew's dead, the engine's destroyed. The gun might work manually," Murphy insists. "If someone could get down there and operate it, the idea hangs between them like a live grenade." The tank destroyer sits in open ground, fully exposed to German fire from 3 directions. Reaching it would require crossing 200 yards of snow-covered field while under direct observation. Operating the gun manually would mean staying in that metal coffin while German infantry closed from all sides. Hayes understands immediately. "Kid, that's not bravery. That's suicide with extra steps." But Murphy's mind is already calculating angles and distances. The tank destroyer's 3-inch gun could break up the German armor advance, buy time for artillery to range in on the infantry. It's mathematically sound, tactically brilliant, and humanly impossible. Exactly the kind of equation that has defined his short military career. German machine guns begin raking the farmhouse walls as enemy infantry closes to within 100 yards. The moment for decision has arrived with the inevitability of artillery fire. Carson looks at his map, at his men, at the radio that connects him to higher headquarters, expecting miracles. Murphy slings the radio over his shoulder and checks his rifle. The destroyed tank destroyer below waits in the snow like a steel altar where good sense goes to die. In the Vosges Mountains' frozen hell, 19-year-old mathematics will test themselves against German steel and veteran infantry. "Cover me," he tells Hayes, and steps toward the door. What the citation will never capture is the taste of copper in Murphy's mouth as he sprints across the open ground, or the way his legs nearly buckle when the first German machine gun finds his range. Snow erupts around his boots as he zigzags toward the tank destroyer, the radio bouncing against his back with each desperate stride. The burned-out vehicle reeks of cordite and worse things. Murphy hauls himself onto the deck, hands shaking as he examines the main gun's manual controls. The electric traverse system is dead, but the mechanical backup still functions. He cranks the gun toward the road, where German armor is emerging from the tree line. 2 Panzer IVs and what looks like a self-propelled gun. Hayes and Kowalski provide covering fire from the farmhouse, their rifles snapping at German infantry that's now advancing across the same field Murphy just crossed. The mathematics of the situation are brutally clear. He has minutes before enemy soldiers reach his position, and the tank destroyer offers no protection against infantry assault. Murphy loads the first round manually, his hands remembering training that seemed academic just hours ago. The gun's optics are cracked but functional. He cranks the elevation wheel, calculating range and lead time, while German machine guns rake the tank destroyer's hull. Sparks fly as bullets strike steel, each impact a reminder of his absolute vulnerability. The first shot misses, falling short of the lead Panzer. Murphy adjusts elevation and fires again, this time watching the round impact directly on the German tank's turret. The vehicle slews sideways and stops, smoke pouring from its engine compartment. But 2 more tanks continue advancing, and German infantry has closed to within 50 yards of his position. What haunts Murphy later, what the official reports will never mention, is the moment he realizes he's going to die on this nameless road junction in the Vosges Mountains. Not the clean, quick death of rifle fire, but the slow burning as enemy infantry swarms his position. The radio on his back crackles with urgent calls from fire direction control, but he can't spare a hand to answer. He fires the 3rd round at the self-propelled gun, watching through the cracked optics as the projectile punches through its thin armor. The vehicle erupts in flames that paint the snow orange and black. German infantry hits the ground, their advance momentarily stalled by the destruction of their supporting armor. Murphy cranks the gun toward the remaining Panzer, his movements mechanical now, divorced from conscious thought. The mathematics of survival have simplified to their most basic equation: kill them before they kill you. The radio chatter in his earpiece seems to come from another world, a place where 19-year-olds don't manually operate tank guns while enemy soldiers close for the kill. The 4th shot stops the last German tank just as enemy infantry reaches the tank destroyer. Murphy drops into the vehicle's interior as rifle grenades explode against the hull above his head. In the Vosges Mountains' January cold, surrounded by the smell of burned metal and his own fear, he finally understands what courage actually costs. The silence that follows combat always surprises soldiers who expect trumpets and clean endings. Murphy sits in the tank destroyer's belly for long minutes after the shooting stops, listening to the sound of snow beginning to fall again on the Vosges mountainside. His hands shake as he finally climbs out onto the deck, rifle ready for German infantry that no longer advance. Hayes and Kowalski reach him first, their faces showing the peculiar mixture of relief and disbelief that follows impossible survival. The radio on Murphy's back still crackles with fire direction requests, but he can't remember how to operate the handset. The mathematical precision that guided his artillery calls has dissolved into simple exhaustion. "Jesus, kid," Hayes says quietly, studying the burning German vehicles scattered across the road junction. "Division's not going to believe this." Lieutenant Carson arrives with the remnants of their small force, already calculating casualty reports and ammunition expenditure. The tactical situation has stabilized, but at a cost that won't appear on any official document. In Eastern France's winter war, victories are measured in hours bought and lives preserved, not ground gained or enemies destroyed. The tank destroyer beneath Murphy's boots has transformed from wreckage into legend, though he can't yet comprehend the change. Years later, when reporters ask about his actions in the Vosges Mountains, he'll struggle to explain the mathematical clarity that guided him from the farmhouse to this road junction. The equations that seemed so obvious under fire will appear insane in retrospect. Kowalski helps Murphy down from the tank destroyer's deck, noting how the kid's legs nearly buckle from delayed shock. "How'd you know the gun would work?" he asks. Murphy doesn't answer immediately. The honest response that he didn't know, that desperation and mathematics had intersected in ways no training manual could predict, seems inadequate. In the 3rd Infantry Division's official records, his actions will be transformed into clean prose about courage under fire and tactical innovation. A medic checks Murphy for wounds he doesn't remember receiving, finding only minor cuts and the kind of shell shock that comes from operating heavy weapons while under direct assault. The radio finally stops crackling as other units report the German offensive has stalled across the entire sector. One teenager's mathematics have helped hold the line in ways that strategic planning couldn't anticipate. That evening, as they establish defensive positions around the captured road junction, Murphy sits with his back against the tank destroyer's track. The Vosges Mountains stretch away into darkness, hiding the scars of a day that will follow him for decades. Hayes finds him there, checking weapons and radio frequencies with mechanical precision. "You did good today, kid," Hayes says. "Real good." Murphy nods but doesn't speak. What he can't articulate, what will wake him from sleep for years afterward, is the memory of cranking that gun manually while German infantry closed for the kill. The mathematics of survival have left equations in his mind that no amount of peacetime living will fully solve. If this story reminded you that behind every medal there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.